Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm guessing you don't think of yourself as someone who avoids hard things. If anything, you've built your career on moving towards pressure, being someone who figures things out in environments where most people would hesitate. So when someone says, don't get comfortable, it doesn't really land the same way. But there's something else there, and you probably feel it, even if you haven't put it to words. You know how to move, how to react, how to handle yourself when things get tense. And over time, that familiarity starts to feel like control. It's not easy, but it's known. And when something is known, you don't have to think about how it is anymore. You just operate. But what if the thing that feels like control is actually keeping you inside a very specific version of yourself in a way that's narrow? Because everything you've gotten good at lives inside this system. Your experience has purpose here. Your decisions make sense here. Your value is crystal clear here. But step outside this system, and the rules aren't necessarily the same. And the things that you've relied on might not transfer the way you expect. And that's where this starts to matter. Not later, not when you're out, right now, while everything still works the way you understand it. However, let's take a quick break, and we'll go further into this subject when we come back. When it comes to sunglasses, first responders and military members definitely don't baby them. They get dropped, thrown in a utility pocket, or tossed in gear bags. Frontline Optics was created for that reality. You get premium eye protection without paying designer brand prices for something that won't survive your lifestyle. From polarized UV 400 lenses to anti-reflective coatings and water repellent finish. And here's where Frontline Optics separates themselves from the pack. When life happens and your glasses break, they offer a no questions asked replacement program, even for prescription lenses. On top of that, Frontline Optics was founded by a firefighter, and a portion of every purchase goes to support the First Responders Children's Foundation, helping families of those who gave everything. So if you're looking for sunglasses that look good and come from a company that actually understands the job, visit frontlineoptics.com and use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your purchase. Frontline Optics, from a first responder for the front lines. You've probably been told, at some point, your experience is going to translate. That what you've done, what you've handled, is going to carry over. And there's truth in that. But not in the way most of us think. Because inside our world, your value is understood without explanation. But outside of that environment, that understanding might not immediately exist. What feels obvious to you might not be obvious to them. The way you make decisions under pressure, the way you prioritize, the way you take ownership of a situation. And most of us won't realize that until we're already in it. Outside of this world, your experience doesn't introduce itself for you. You have to do that. You have to take something that you've lived and translate it into something that can be understood by someone who's never been there. Think about it. When was the last time you had to break down what you bring to the table in a way that someone unfamiliar could actually grasp it? Not as a list of assignments or roles, but as patterns. How you think, how you solve problems, how you lead, how you adapt when things don't go according to plan. Those are the things that carry value, but only if they're made understandable. And that creates a gap between what you actually bring and what someone else can recognize. And if that gap isn't closed, it doesn't matter how capable you are. You'll be underestimated. You might even be overlooked. Or you'll end up in something that doesn't come close to what you're actually capable of. That's the part that catches people off guard. They don't fail because they weren't prepared to work. They struggle because they weren't prepared to explain. And that shift, it's subtle. You won't feel it all at once. It just shows up. when you expect things to carry more influence than they do. There's something else sitting underneath that. And most of us don't look at it until we have to. Because up till now, your edge hasn't just come from what you know. It comes from how you operate, your discipline, your consistency, doing what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. You've got a level of steadiness. But here's where things start to shift a little. Those traits don't go away, but they stop being the differentiator. Because in the civilian world, there are a lot of people who will work hard. There are a lot of people who are disciplined. There are a lot of people who show up and execute. So then the question becomes, what are you building on top of that? Because if nothing is changing, if nothing is being added, then over time, what used to set you apart starts to level out. And that doesn't happen overnight either. It's quiet. You don't feel it. But the world outside, it's moving. Tools and systems are changing. Expectations are changing. And they aren't going to wait for you to catch up. That's the part that gets missed. You can be highly competent and still fall behind because everything else moves forward. And if you're not actively stepping into something new, learning something unfamiliar, putting yourself in positions where you're not the most comfortable person in the room, then you're staying exactly where you are. And over time, still working and still growing start to separate. And that gap gets wider the longer it's ignored. Because it's not just about how well you perform anymore. It's about how current you are, what you've added, what you've adapted to, what you've taken time to understand before you need it. Because the environment you're in right now, it's structured to keep you sharp in a very specific way. It's not designed to keep you current in everything. That part, you have to take ownership of. And that's a different kind of pressure. Not the kind that you're used to. Not the kind that you've trained for. But the kind that decides whether you stay relevant or whether you slowly start to drift. And that's usually where the next shift starts to show up, whether you're ready for it or not. But this is a good point to stop and for me to tell you more about the new changes coming to the podcast. We'll get back to it when we come back. Let me take a quick second, because this is the last week that you're going to hear this message. If you've been following these episodes inside the Transition Drill podcast, the formal change is happening. Starting next week, these episodes will only be released on their own podcast channels. Your next objective. If you haven't already, you can find the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So if you've been getting value from these episodes, if they've been part of how you think about your next step, please go make that switch now. Go find your next objective and follow it or subscribe to it. I've put links in the show notes so that you can easily get to your preferred platform. Because again, next week, that's the only place you'll find these episodes. So don't miss out. Pause right now, unless you're driving, and go follow and then come back and finish this one. Thank you again for listening or watching. Let's get back into this episode. Another thing you need to consider, and it's a little harder to see because it doesn't show up in what you do. It shows up in how you see yourself. Because over time, you don't just get good at the job. You start to become part of it. The way you carry yourself, the way you think. It all starts to line up with the role that you've been in. But the longer you stay in it, the more it starts to define the boundaries of who you are. Because everything around you reinforces it. The people you work with think the same way. The environment rewards the same behaviors. The standards are clear. So your identity, it fits perfectly where you are. There's no friction. But friction is usually what tells you something is changing. And if there isn't any, it's easy to assume everything is solid. But then suddenly, the things that made you feel grounded don't hit the same way. And that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because you're used to knowing where you stand. You're used to being understood without having to adjust who you are. And when that changes, it can feel like something's off. But most of us don't interpret that as a signal to expand. We interpret it as a sign to pull back, to stay where things make sense. But here's the problem with that. If everything that makes you feel like yourself only exists inside one environment, then what happens when that environment is no more? Because identity doesn't shift all at once. It tightens over time. It gets more specific, more refined, more connected to what you've proven you can do. And once that version gets locked in, anything outside of it starts to feel unfamiliar, even if it's exactly where you need to go next. And when that moment shows up, that's a different kind of feeling. Because up to this point, even when things are hard, you know how to move. You know what right looks like. You know how to adjust. There's a baseline of competence you can rely on. But what's next is different. There's no muscle memory there. No repetition to fall back on. No clear standard that you've already internalized. So stepping into something where you're not immediately good, where you might stumble, where you don't have the answers right away, that doesn't feel like progress. It actually feels like risk. But here's what you need to understand. That space where you won't be as sharp, not as fast, not as certain, that's the only place your range expands beyond what you already know. And you can handle that. You've handled worse. But that doesn't mean there's no cost. And the longer you avoid being a beginner, the harder it becomes to step into it later. Because your tolerance for that discomfort gets lower. You get used to being good. You get used to being the one others are relying on. And stepping out of that starts to feel like you're moving backwards. But the only way forward is through that exact space. The one that doesn't feel like you. The one that doesn't feel natural. The one where you don't get to rely on everything that you've built. And once that's in play, the decisions you make around it start to matter a lot more than they seem on the surface. They're about whether you're willing to let go of being who you've already proven you can be long enough to become something else. In these careers, we don't just do a job. We become it. You've likely spent years merging your personality with your professional responsibilities until the line between who I am and what I do has completely disappeared. This is the reality of identity hyperspecialization. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's what makes you proficient, but on the other hand, it creates a grief of expertise that you're gonna have to face head on. To move forward, to move towards a successful transition, you aren't just gonna need to learn new skills. You're effectively going to grieve the loss of the current version of yourself. You have to make room for a novice identity. It's an internal clash where your pride tells you that you've already paid your dues, while your future reality demands that you pay them all over again. So you have to ask yourself, is your current comfort actually a strategic risk? By protecting your ego today, you might be sacrificing your relevance tomorrow. Remember, the world outside doesn't care about your past mastery as much as it cares about your current ability to adapt. If you don't start the process of letting go of the expert you are today, you'll find yourself clinging to a ghost once the uniform is gone. This is why the imposter paradox is so important to recognize. When you start trying to branch out into new challenges, you're gonna feel like you don't belong. You might even feel like a fraud. But that feeling is actually your resilience being built. It's proof that you're doing the hard work, and you have to be brave enough to be the person who knows the least in the room. Facing this grief now is what allows you to build a bridge to what's next, rather than falling into the gap when the mission finally ends. Let's take another quick break, and when we come back, I'll go over the specific transition group tips. When you look forward to that first cup of coffee, as soon as that morning alarm goes off, then Blue Line Roasting is the choice for you. They're a Tennessee-based law enforcement-owned company. They're roasting small batches of premium coffee, fresh, within 48 hours of your ordering and ship fast so it doesn't sit around getting stale. From Patriot, their light roast, to Failure Drill, their dark roast. They've got something that fits whatever you prefer. Whole bean or ground, it's your call. But Blue Line Roasting is more than just good coffee. A portion of every purchase goes to support law enforcement families who are dealing with line of duty injury or loss. So your morning routine becomes something bigger. Great coffee and real impact. Grab a single bag, try a sampler, or set up a subscription so you're never caught without it. Shipping is always free. And for the listeners of this podcast, use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your order. Head on over to bluelineroasting.com and make your morning count. Close range group. If you're less than a year out from your transition, your objective is to never stop learning. At this stage, the clock is ticking, and the anxiety of being a student again can feel overwhelming. You need to focus on transition learning. That's the process of taking your years of experience and figuring out how to turn that information into a business value. This isn't just about reading a book. It's about learning the environment you're moving towards. Who are the players? What does the operational space look like for that industry? You've been an expert in your world, but now you need to be a student of theirs. Don't let the fear of being a newbie stop you from asking the basic questions that's going to save you from a massive headache later. Medium range group. If you've still got 3 to 5 years left for your transition, your goal is to find new challenges, both personally and professionally. You're in a unique position where you have the stability to take risks. Seek out non-tactical projects that stress test your identity outside of your primary job function. Volunteer for that admin position. Lead a project that has nothing to do with something that you're already good at. Or take a course in the related field you want to get to, especially if that course will intimidate you. Pushing yourself with new professional challenges within your current organization, though, allows you to practice being the beginner while you still have the safety net of your current position. It's about building the resilience you'll need before the pressure is truly on. Long range group. If you're newer or new and your transition is over a decade away, your mission is to always be the newbie. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you need to cultivate intellectual humility. Intentionally put yourself in situations where you have the least knowledge, experience, and authority. Take up a hobby where you're the worst one in the place, or join a community group where this job and your position means absolutely nothing. This decouples your ego from your position. Always act like it's your first day. And just as importantly, be mindful of how you treat the people around you when it's their first day. Staying humble now ensures that you don't become extinct later. This journey of preparation isn't something you have to figure out in a vacuum. I produce a weekly newsletter that contains additional transition information and insights specifically designed to help you plan and prepare for what's next. If you're looking for a bit more guidance as you navigate towards your transition, I'd love to have you join us. Please sign up. At some point, you're going to find yourself in a place where the way you've always operated doesn't carry the same value because it's not the whole picture anymore. And when that moment shows up, it won't feel like everything fell apart. It'll feel like something's just missing. Like you're still capable, still disciplined, still doing what you've always done, but it might not fit the way you expect it to. You've built a life around being the person who can handle anything. But is your current comfort actually a strategic risk? You're protecting your ego today, but are you doing it at the expense of your future? It's easy to stay in the world where everyone knows your name and your reputation is solid. It's a lot harder to imagine a world where none of that matters. If you were to start a brand new career tomorrow, would you be all right being that person who knows the least in the room? Your transition is coming, whether it's on your timeline or a timeline forced upon you. You can either start the uncomfortable process of being a newbie now on your own terms, or you can wait until the uniform is gone and the world demands it of you. Don't let your expertise today become the cage that keeps you from your next objective. Thanks for staying until the end. Staying all the way through helps the engagement ratings. Send me your comments. Be honest with what you like or what I'm doing wrong. I can only make changes to best benefit you if I hear from you. Also, please share the podcast with anyone who you think would enjoy it or benefit from it. And don't forget to follow the new podcast, Your Next Objective. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.